My name is Jacques Howard, and in this capacity, I am representing Trenton Cycling Revolution, Trenton, New Jersey's biking and pedestrian advocacy organization. So this is going to be a very interactive presentation. We have some amazing human beings who are on this call. So those who don't know each other, it's very important for all of us to get to know each other. That's how we build a better community for everyone. So we're going to ask that everyone put their email address in the chat. You don't need anything fancy, your website or anything, just your email address. And going forward throughout the presentation, put your questions in the chat box. What we're going to do is try to capture all that content and then make sure that all of us can stay connected throughout the year so that we can support each other in what we're all trying to do, wherever that is, regarding safe streets and everything. Thank you so much, Andrew. He's the number one. We'll make sure that you get some sort of a prize from Trenton 365. So with that being said, we're going to move on to the next slide. I mean, this is what today's discussion is going to be about. I'm not going to go through each and every one of these questions. We're going to just take a couple of minutes and just kind of look over them and share a little bit about what this presentation is going to be about. We're going to answer some general questions about what Complete and Green Streets are, what policies currently exist in Trenton, and what ones don't. I mean, because that's something that we need to think about as well, is what is happening in other places, other municipalities, et cetera, that can be easily implemented here. Why do we want to update our Complete and Green Streets policy? And then lots and lots of questions. And most importantly, how you can engage and you can be a part of this, whether tonight in the discussion, following up, sharing this information, sharing recording, etc. And with that, I pass it over to one of my fantastic teammates who's going to take over for me. Sonia.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining, and thanks to a number of our partners that are also on here tonight. So my name is Sonia Stensna. I'm with the Tri-State Transportation Campaign and Trenton Cycling Revolution. So I'm logged in on here twice. So I just realized I was writing in the chat as as Tri-State Transportation Campaign. So that's me. So I'm going to run you through what Complete Streets are, the general policy that we have, and then some changes that we're looking to make with the ordinance, and I'll pull in a few other people to speak on that. And then we have a number of experts on here to help with questions. So just starting with like what Complete Streets are. I know many of you might be familiar, but basically Complete Streets are streets that are designed to accommodate safe movement and travel of all road users. So that's people walking, people driving, skateboarding, bicycling, using a wheelchair and other mobility devices, scooters, what have you. So it's really thinking about how to make sure everyone has space on the roadway that keeps them safe and also that accommodates their needs. So they look different in different contexts. So Complete Streets can be streets with sidewalks and crosswalks. They could be bus lanes, bike lanes, other forms of traffic calming. These are elements of complete street design. And I think this is a really helpful visualization of a regular street design and then that same street incorporating Complete Streets design elements. So you can see here that there are accommodations for, on the right-hand side, you could see there are accommodations for a variety of people traveling on the roadway, as opposed to on the left-hand side where it's just for vehicles. So you can see the sidewalks incorporate people walking, the crosswalks give them a safe, visible way to get across the street. There are fewer lanes, so that means the cars are going slower, and there are clear markings that kind of let a road user know what's going to happen. So that's kind of what a complete street functions as and what it looks like. And then green streets are another layer on complete streets. So complete streets accommodate all road users, but green streets also think about stormwater and how we're managing rainfall and making sure that runoff isn't going into our waterways and polluting them. So some common elements you see in green streets can be rain gardens that are bump outs, permeable pavements, tree pits, bioswales, and other forms of green infrastructure that really take the water in and slowly filter it back into the ground, as opposed to going off the road surface, gathering all of the pollutants on the road and going straight into our waterways. So green streets also have this like added benefit of adding vegetation to the city, so it can help with the urban heat island effect. So why do we need or want complete streets or complete and green streets? For one, safety is like one of the most important elements. A core principle of complete streets is that everyone can travel on the roads without fear of death or serious injury. And making sure people can do that means they can access just the basics, sometimes getting to work, getting to school, getting their groceries, and staying safe on the road. It also ensures people have access to healthcare and healthy foods. And especially for people without vehicles, this is really critical. Green streets, as I mentioned, have a multitude of benefits, but also getting people outside of vehicles encourages active living, which helps people live healthier lives, and also helps reduce congestion, which improves our air quality, could help with asthma and other issues. So just going back to safety, here's a visual of the crash data in Trenton from 2016 to 2020. In the red dots, you can see that's where people have been killed or seriously injured in the city. And in green, you can see less severe bicycle and pedestrian crashes. So that was created by Marco, who's working on a Vision Zero action plan for the city. And I'll ask Marco to speak a little bit about that in a couple of slides. So just note that that's what Trend Vision Zero is. And here you could clearly see what parts of the city might need complete streets design elements the most. And it also gives you a great visual of like how accessible are our parks in the city based on where those red dots are. So why do we want to update our current policy? Trenton does have a complete streets policy. It was adopted in 2012. At the time, it was an award-winning policy, but we are thinking that a few different elements might help with implementation. Notably, there are 2 exceptions in the current policy that might not prevent, but inhibit certain complete streets elements getting implemented. So one, there's currently an exemption if new facilities are defined as excessive or 20% cost of 20% or more of the cost of the total project. And so, you know, that's an exemption that can really prevent any projects from moving forward. And we really think that incorporating every road user should be a core principle in any road project rather than a nice amenity to this. Maintenance projects right now are also exempt from complete streets policies, but with clear planning, our repaving program could be an easy way to incorporate more crosswalks, bump outs, traffic calming, and also bike lanes. So this is like a really an easier way to implement complete streets regularly in the city. So other elements that are not in the current policy that we are looking to incorporate in this update is there's no advisory body. So there is a complete street steering committee that has existed and worked together for years, flagging grants and making sure the city is aware of opportunities. But we would like to codify this group so that others can get involved and increase the participation. The current ordinance that we're talking about also will clearly recommend community involvement in projects, whereas the current policy doesn't say not to do that, but it also doesn't clearly state to do that. And then the current policy also doesn't have benchmarking or annual reporting. And I think this is really critical for us as people living in the city and working in the city to just have a good grasp on what projects have been implemented, what projects, you know, maybe have been planned and not implemented, what areas of the city are getting investments, and, you know, is there a need to spread that out differently? So that kind of benchmarking and yearly reporting will help everyone stay informed on what's happening. And so the other reason we want to update our complete streets policy is because the ordinance is kind of the gold standard. A good way to think about it is that resolutions are kind of like statements of support for something. Policies are kind of like recommended processes and actions, but ordinances make this actually law and a requirement to follow. So this will be us really committing to complete streets in the city. So getting into a few of the major changes in the complete streets ordinance. The existing policy talks about a number of helpful design guidance. However, we now have this really lovely document called the Complete Streets Design Handbook that is custom designed for implementing complete streets in the city. And I'm going to actually let Cassidy Bolin of DVRPC talk a little bit about that and how it would work.
Thanks, Sonia. I'm sorry, there's some dog activity outside my window if you hear that. So this is a document that we worked on for a number of years, consulting heavily with the Complete Streets group that Sonia mentioned, as well as talking with the city and understanding best practice from across the country in terms of how other cities formalize or make kind of decisions about design clearer and easier from the get-go. So the foundational piece for this design handbook is that we created typologies or different types of streets, or I guess we didn't create them, but we identified different types of streets in the city. And then based on each street type, we set out what would be a floor or must-have required elements. And that did vary a little bit on project type. So Sonia mentioned that, you know, a reconstruction is a little bit different than a maintenance project. So we wanted to make sure to address that, both to keep it implementable from the city's perspective, but also when people are looking at it or they want to advocate for a particular project, they know kind of what's on the table for each type of project. So once we created those different categories of streets, and I can put the link to this handbook, it is a big one, in the chat afterwards, you can look at what are the required, recommended, and kind of as needed elements for each one. There's also, it's really graphic, which I think is helpful. It also has a description of a lot of these elements, because sometimes, you know, not everyone knows what a chicane is. We wanted this to be a one-stop shop as much as possible. And that's both for residents, but also when we think of a developer who might be coming in and ripping up a street or the sidewalk or something like that, that the city can then point that developer to what they must do, both from a design perspective and then, you know, paying for things once they're touching that important transportation infrastructure. So the ordinance specifically will refer to the handbook, but the things that'll be most official is that people for different types of projects would need to use the checklists that are in the handbook. So there's a direct link between the checklists, what checklists, you know, is walking people through, and then what's in the handbook. But it does make it a little bit easier that the checklist could be updated without necessarily the handbook having to fully be updated. So I think, you know, decoupling it is trying to kind of get the best of both worlds of keeping it flexible. So that's kind of the biggest way that the ordinance will really update and provide way more guidance to everyone who's kind of interested in Trenton streets, and, you know, really set out expectations. And then for individual projects, I think the community can weigh in about things like, oh, this is recommended. Do we think this is a good fit for us? Is this our top priority? Things like that. So we really tried to keep it flexible in that way, so it can be used in a lot of different ways for a lot of different types of projects.
Thanks, Cassidy. Yeah, and definitely take a look at that link. It is intimidating document if you just look at the page count, but it's really friendly when you dive in. So the other major change to the Complete Streets policy through this ordinance will be the creation of a Safe Streets for All steering committee, like I mentioned before. So this group will be responsible for the benchmarking that I mentioned, and it will also be various members from within the city, but would also encourage county, county and state DOT participation, as well as New Jersey Transit and residents from different wards. So we're trying to get a bunch of people together to really be thinking about, you know, how does our transportation network really impact different aspects of people's lives, not just getting from point A to point B, but accessing what you need to access. So this is kind of the group that will be flagging opportunities, going through that checklist, providing feedback, hosting community listening sessions, and facilitating conversations with residents. And it will really, you know, I think help have a regular occurring conversation about transportation in the city. And it's also going to be integrated with that Vision Zero action plan that I want to give Marco a chance to talk about now.
Sure, thanks, Sonia. Yeah, the Vision Zero action plan actually came out of the Trenton 250 planning process. It was identified as an important strategy for Trenton to kind of adopt a Vision Zero policy. And what that really means, right, is that you're kind of shifting how the city and sort of transportation professionals in the city are thinking about safety. So, you know, we're moving away from a kind of traditional approach to safety where maybe the focus is on reducing all crashes to a focus on really eliminating those deaths and serious injuries. And it's a policy that's been adopted by a lot of Trenton's kind of peer cities in New Jersey and Northeast and around the country. And it really works really hand in hand with a complete streets policy. The two kind of are really well aligned. So we've been working with the city on starting to develop the action plan, and sort of knowing that this ordinance was coming through this process. We also have been thinking about how we can best align it. So, you know, thinking about how this Safe Streets for All steering committee could help to kind of implement that Vision Zero action plan. And one of the key things that we're doing is, you know, part of that action plan is to develop a high injury network. So we're looking at the crash data. So that's why Sonia had that map from before. Those are some of the crash points that we're looking at to kind of identify what are sort of subset of streets in Trenton that are, you know, where those most severe crashes are happening. And then how can we help kind of set out some clear goals for the city on kind of prioritizing resources so that we can address the safety issues on those streets. There's a lot more to it, but you know, that's kind of a broad overview and something that we're, you know, still very much in the process of.
Yeah, I think that'll be a future community discussion, but in the ordinance, we do outline like some of the recommended benchmarking that this steering committee would do, and it directly references elements of the Vision Zero action plan that we would want to be tracking as a city that commits to a 0 deaths goal. So that's kind of how that works together. I'm going to just briefly like kind of show you who would be eligible for membership on the advisory body. And then I'll do a quick recap and see if people have questions. So kind of a core principle of the advisory body is that we want multiple people from different departments in the city talking to each other about this issue. And this is both from the perspective of implementing Complete Streets and getting to Vision Zero. So we want to make sure that all the departments are talking to each other and coordinating on projects, which is why members of the committee would make up these general directors from the departments or a designee. And then, as I mentioned before, we'd also want to incorporate our others that are within the planning realm or have jurisdiction of certain roads in Trenton. So Mercer County owns a bunch of roads in the city that the city can't necessarily do anything to, but in partnership maybe we could influence Mercer County's design, for example, with the handbook. DBRPC, which have already demonstrated on this call, they're great partnerships. So they would be a potential member of the advisory body. DOT, which is of course involved in many of these projects and also has jurisdiction over many of our roads, as well as someone from schools and New Jersey Transit. And then we would also want to make sure that members of the community could serve on this advisory committee if they wanted to, one person from each ward, and then members representing a variety of different interest groups or identities. So we really want to make sure that we have everyone at the table for these conversations. So that's like the general advisory body. So just to summarize like some of the elements of the new ordinance, it will make the Complete and Green Streets law as opposed to just policy. It will create a formal Safe Streets for All steering committee to assist with all the things we just talked about. It updates some language on the purpose of Complete and Green Streets. So it talks about the health impacts, the economic impacts, and a number of other things that are not in the last policy, which I'll also make sure to link in the chat. It makes the Complete Streets Design Handbook kind of our official guidance document and the checklists. It includes maintenance as an opportunity to implement Complete Streets. And I just mentioned adding the checklist. So those are just some of the things that happen that are different in this new ordinance when compared to the old policy. I think it really just spells a lot of things out that's left to interpretation in the current policy. So it makes it really clear what we're looking to do and why we're looking to improve our streets. So I'm gonna pause there and see if there are questions from anyone, either in the chat or if anyone wants to come off mute and just ask.
Sonia, it's Kathy Deal. I was speaking with one of our neighbors today, and she was asking if the Complete Streets program will also incorporate the concrete that allows water to go through, if that is part of the initiative, and if that is, or if that would be, how would that be incorporated?
So are you referencing like permeable pavements?
Yes.
Yeah, so it is a recommendation, I believe, in a number of the typologies within the handbook, and it is directly referenced in the checklists.
Perfect. Thank you. I'll let her know.
Yeah, if I can just elaborate on that. I think, admittedly, Marco and I are not green stormwater management professionals, so there's a lot of recommendations, many fewer requirements. And we do identify where the combined sewer overflow area is in Trenton, which is mostly in the south, as being a priority area for green stormwater management because of the existing infrastructure. But yes, definitely encouraged.
Thanks, Cassie.
Sherelle, you could come off mute and share that if you'd like.
Thank you, Sonia. Hello, everyone. Okay, because I even put the wrong date in. I even put my camera on for you. Hi, guys. So, Jacques, I see that you said you wanted to do a walk around. So, East Trenton Collaborative, some of our residents are walking on, it's supposed to be June 22nd, actually. So what we're going to do, I mean, we need some traffic calming measures in this neighborhood like yesterday. North Olden and North Clinton Avenue is one dangerous intersection. We don't even have a school crossing guard for our children. The lights, the signalization over there hasn't been updated since maybe the early 80s. I mean, now you got the hand that comes up, so it tells you to stop, or the person walking. I mean, updated. So the residents with the staff at the collaborative, we're going to walk around. We're going to recognize and pinpoint which streets need some traffic calming measures, which streets may need some crosswalks. With Jock and you, Sonia, and Matthew, maybe you, Anthony, too, Santora. If you guys want to join us and help give us some lingo that we can use to ask for things, because we're learning about, I think it's collapsible bollards. So you know, the traffic that is not supposed to come in, and I love that. I don't know what it was, Sonia, that green space you had, Green Street with the environmental bump outs. That is beautiful. And it looked like a rain garden or something that was, so you know, the infrastructure over here is really bad too. Flooding, we are in a flood area. It floods, it floods. So if we had something catching that rain, that would be great. So June 22nd, and we're meeting at 601 North Clinton Avenue at 5:30 to walk around in that neighborhood. So that neighborhood goes from, I don't know if we're gonna do the whole thing, but it goes from Lincoln Avenue all the way to Enterprise Avenue.
That sounds great, Sherelle. Thank you for inviting us. We could do a
Thank you.
full road safety audit.
Sherelle, I'm out of town that day, but is there any way to get a preview?
A pre-tour.
Yeah. Because I wish I could be here for it, but I'd be glad to come down and visit with you any
Lisa,
other time.
Yeah, Lisa, if you want to curate something a little quicker, like if you need, some special things, I know you and I were planning to get together as well. We could double up on that also. So maybe you, Sherelle, and myself, we could kind of coordinate off the side. If you don't get both of us, maybe you'll get one of us and we'll go from there.
Perfect.
Awesome.
Great, thanks for sharing. Does anyone else have anything they want to share or any questions? Either one.
I'd like to ask a question. This is Lori. Could you share with us the best ways, like steps we can take to help advocate for this ordinance with like dates and times and,
Like, you know, the next slide.
Oh, well, there you go.
Sounds like she's a plant.
That was not planned. I had not seen the slideshow ahead of time, but there you go.
So thanks, Lori, for the perfect question. So next week, we have not yet confirmed. So I think we're going to hear on Friday. Is that right, Anthony / Jeff? So on Friday, we'll send out a blast to all of you if you're okay with it, confirming this, but we're hearing that council will see this for the first time on Tuesday during their conference meeting. That will be in the council conference room at 5:30, unless I missed something that changes. And then it'll have its first hearing at the council meeting in the council chambers on Thursday at 5:30. And so ordinances are heard twice. So it'll be, I see Anthony, it might have a correction.
Are we still virtual with city council, or has anybody heard anything about them going back to chambers? I haven't. That's the only reason I was asking.
I based my information off council's website, which admittedly may not be up to date. So I
don't think so.
I will confirm that. And when we send out the blast confirming that it's definitely next week, then we will let you know if it's virtual or in person. So yeah, so ordinances are generally heard twice, so they'll be voting on it on Thursday. But it would be wonderful if you want to see this happen in Trenton to voice your support at really either of the meetings. But I'm hearing Tuesday's meeting might be more impactful to be at, to get it on like the consent agenda. But yeah, it would be wonderful. I think that showing, even if you can't make either of these meetings, if you wanted to reach out to your council person and let them know that you're supportive, that would be a huge help.
Sonia, it's Kathy again. I just wanted to possibly just put a bug in your ear that maybe we should send this out to Ray Ingram, who does the email blasts for Trenton Civic Associations. So he's would be a good person to send this out to blast all of the civic associations throughout the 4 wards.
Yeah, that would be great.
I'll help you follow up with that after this.
Awesome, thank you.
And off the record, we're meeting with the mayor the following week. So I think if something like this were to pass at one of these meetings, I think that definitely would be a good talking point or a good time when we go to engage the mayor about Vision Zero the week after.
Yeah, and actually I was gonna say that one idea we had about the next community discussion, just to keep it wonky, is to talk about Vision Zero and why it's important for the city. And that might be a good opportunity to reconvene, talk about how council went and the mayor meeting went, and then we could see if there's support needed there's resident support needed to show for Vision Zero.
What's the, usually when you have an ordinance, you have the introduction and then you have the hearing. Is it like a 2-week gap or anything specific in terms of the process?
Normally, they will schedule the first reading, and then during the first reading, they'll give you the date that they'll put it up for public hearing. So that usually follows 14 days after, but been a little bit different with council lately. So, but there will be a public hearing on it that the city clerk will announce at the meeting that it goes through first reading.
And then the public hearing is where they really want to hear from the public about their support or their comments or their questions or their issues.
Yes, but if it's on a docket Tuesday for docket review, the regular conference meeting, anybody can speak on any of the resolutions or ordinances that are up for that. And then public comment on Thursday meeting, you can speak about anything you want to. So as many times as you could throw it in for them, they'll take it.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're giving you a lot of options. Cool. Anyone else have any thoughts, or this is our discussion time also? And if you know someone else that, like, you know, the Council of Civic Associations or someone else that was not able to make it today, but you think should know about this, we've been recording the meeting, so we can put up like the presentation with the recording, and then we're always happy to answer questions. So here are 2 emails, but there's a lot of experts in the room. So if you want to talk to anyone, you could just reach out.
Sure, Sonia, I want to jump in too and say, first of all, well done on this presentation. I know I was part of the team that helped to get some eyes on it prior to the public sharing of it, but I think it was done well. I think the images are great. So kudos to everybody who played a part in that. I also want to say it's great that we're having some opportunities for us to get together whether it's in small groups or not. Lisa and Sherelle, I just sent over request to meet with you all. I'll make myself available to your schedule. And then let's keep this ball going, so to speak, and keep the momentum going forward. Again, this is all about, it's going to go as far as we want to take it. And this is just the process and the steps that we have to do. And we've got to teach other people how to do it. So kudos to everybody who's on this line. I know we're recording it and we're going to share it like crazy to get more people involved in the process. But this is literally what has to be done to have the things that we want to happen in our community happen. Thank you.
Thanks, Jacques. Andrew, I see your hand up.
Hi, my name is Andrew Giraldi, and I appreciate the presentation tonight. One question that I have with regards to the Vision Zero and Complete Streets advocacy is, what strategy is there to incorporate this work with the economic revitalization of Trenton's 4 wards? Because I'd like to see a cohesive network of actions that tie together, that reinforce each other, where the Complete Streets build a culture of pedestrian activity, which supports Main Street, which supports local businesses, something along those lines. Can you discuss a little bit more about what is being done in that realm?
Well, I think that the key part of having the variety of groups together in the Complete Streets like steering committee is going to be to like facilitate those conversations so that projects aren't happening in silos, but you're considering all these elements when you're doing a project to revitalize a street, for example. So it's really about like having those communications across the departments that might be doing different things, and making sure that everything's, complementary.
Thank you.
And I'll just add real quick that the 250 LDO is still in draft, I believe, and that has a lot of interesting things in it that pertain to bicycle parking, that are about sidewalk usage, about how the buildings interact with the street. So it's being sort of approached from 2 different angles. And I think I'm waiting to hear, I think it's going to be, the first draft is going to be presented soon. So I think you'll see a lot of interesting stuff in there. If you haven't already checked that out on the website.
And the LDO references the Complete Streets Design Handbook, so it is reinforcing.
Thanks again. I appreciate the response.
Thanks for joining.
If I can add to that, I think it would be interesting to think of, I'm trying to think how other places have tried to tie all of that together rather than keeping them, just like separate quality of life things. And I know some places have really focused on their location at like on a trail. And so that makes me think of like the DNR, which we know who owns it, the city or the state environmental department's not necessarily doing the best job maintaining it, but it's interesting to think, could there be a future where people are really enjoying the trail and then they stop and they have lunch someplace in Trenton, and that's like becomes a more formalized and encouraged thing that could be kind of interesting to think through too.
Just a note on that, like there are people regularly coming through the city on bikes because they're doing the East Coast Greenway, which goes from Maine to Florida along the DNR. So I think that's a really, a reality that's really close with just some careful wayfinding and maintenance. And that gives me an opportunity to plug that tomorrow. A man named Shan Riggs is running the East Coast Greenway, and he'll be coming to Trenton around 3. So if you want to welcome him to the city, I think he'll be crossing the Trenton Makes Bridge somewhere around that time. So he's doing the whole 3,000 plus miles. So it'll be exciting to see him visit our city.
He has to, if he buys like 20 sandwiches, that's your economic development right there. He's gonna need them.
Well, he's
And hopefully
definitely
they're
gonna go to
local
the saloon.
Sorry.
What did you say? Sorry.
That hopefully they're local sandwiches and not like Dunkin' Donuts sandwiches.
Yes, definitely. Well, if no one else has anything to say, we can wrap up and give you a little bit of daylight left, but
I do have one quick thing to say. Can we just make sure that someone captures all the things that are put in the chat?
Yeah,
And when we share the link that we get that out to everyone. But I just posted a link to some photos that we took back in 2018 on the DNR when we were doing a cleanup with TCR. And there was a tourist that was traveling from South Korea, and they were driving across the country. And we met them on the cleanup and took some really cool pictures. So that's what that link is from Google Photos. But yeah, let's just keep the momentum going. Willing to do whatever I can on my side to get as much information out as possible, coordinate what needs to be done, get some bodies involved. And again, let's build the community that we want.
Can I say one last thing? I feel like I'm talking way too much. But one last thing to tee up is we will be starting a bike plan. Let's say end of summer-ish. So I hope we can engage all of you and continue to kind of flesh out the plans for Complete Streets in Trenton.
bike plan. And then we could just, anytime a road is repaved, I can see it now. We'll just automatically stripe in that bike lane. Add the retractable bollards or the curb protected bike lane. I don't know. I'm waiting to see Anthony's face change.
I'm freezing on a smile. We're working on all that.
Okay. Well, thank you all. It was great. Great chatting. To our next, maybe our next meetup will be in person. We'll see.
Thank you so much, Sonia.
Thanks, Sonia.
Thank you.
Ross.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Take care, everybody. Have a
Thank
good
you.
night. Be safe out
Take
there.
care.
Take care now. Enjoy yourself.